No nation's rise is predestined. A nation must fight for its own rise. Over 100 years ago, when Mr. Sun Yat-sen, stroke by stroke, wrote down his strategies for national reconstruction, when thousands upon thousands of patriotic students took to the streets, waving flags and shouting for the future of the nation, when on a tour boat on South Lake in Jiaxing, the founding of the Communist Party of China was declared. China was still a land of broken mountains and rivers, swaying in a storm. But today, over 100 years later, China has risen to become the world's second largest economy, with its total economic output accounting for about 1/6 of the global total. And that's not all. Across our homeland, an unprecedented super network is being rolled out on a massive scale. When you break it down, you will see 48,000 kilometers of ultra-high voltage transmission lines, 115,000 kilometers of natural gas and crude oil pipelines, 146,000 kilometers of railway network, and 5,198,000 kilometers of road network. Many of these rank first in the world. And all of this is not only a miracle in the history of human economics and construction, but also a miracle in the 5,000-year history of the Chinese civilization. A miracle profound enough to console our ancestors after nearly 100 years of humiliation. So, over the past 100+ years, what exactly has China done? And how did we, step by step, manage to complete this unprecedented reshaping of the Earth's surface on this blue planet? Next, we will attempt to answer this question from a geographical perspective. But first, we must reacquaint ourselves with the land beneath our feet. You may know that it stretches far from north to south and is wide from east to west, with a land area of nearly 10 million square kilometers, making it one of the countries with the richest natural resources in the world. But on the other hand, its terrain is complex. Mountains and hills make up over 60% of its land area. The 4 Great Plateaus, the 4 Great Basins, and the 3 Great Plains are all nestled within a crisscrossing network of mountains, making connection between them difficult. Its resources are unevenly distributed. For example, 80% of the water resources are found in the southern regions, while 75% of the coal is located in Shaanxi, Inner Mongolia, Shaanxi, Xinjiang, and Guizhou, these 5 provinces and regions. And that's not all. After several thousand years of development, by the time the new China was founded, its forest coverage had dropped to less than 9%. Land desertification and salinization were also getting worse day by day. It reached a point where one scholar lamented, "This is a severely degraded natural environment." Transportation was blocked. Resources were unevenly distributed. The environment was deteriorating. For a fractured China, with its broken mountains and rivers, how could it possibly change its destiny? One of the keys was to cross the great rivers, the high mountains and deep gorges, and the straits and bays, to connect this vast country into a single whole. But what we had at the beginning was just 9.3 kilometers of railway, a single steel bridge with a main span of 62 meters, and one tunnel 261 meters long. It wasn't until 1937, when the Hangzhou-Qianting River Bridge was completed, that the Chinese people finally had the very first road and rail bridge they had designed and built themselves. However, to stop the invasion of the Japanese army, the bridge's designer, Mao Yisheng, had to personally sink it to the bottom of the river. It was only completely repaired after the founding of the new China. And then, less than 4 years later, the completion of the Wuhan-Yangtze River Bridge allowed the Chinese people to cross the natural barrier of the Yangtze River for the very first time. Even though the Soviet Union later withdrew all its experts, China's new generation of bridge engineers still overcame immense difficulties and successfully designed and built the Nanjing Yangtze River Bridge. And so, the railways on both banks of the Yangtze River, which had faced each other from afar for decades, were finally connected as one. The two great corridors, the Beijing-Guangzhou and Beijing-Shanghai lines, were born. However, the single-span length of these bridges was still limited, making them unsuitable for more complex terrain. It wasn't until the completion of Shanghai-Nanpu Bridge in 1991 that the era of China independently building long-span bridges truly began. From then on, our bridges became increasingly diverse and magnificent. Not only could they cross the Yangtze River in a single span, but they could also fly directly across gorges at a height of 565.4 meters above the valley floor. Meanwhile, deep underground, tunnel engineering was also advancing by leaps and bounds. It took us nearly 100 years to see the birth of our first 10,000-meter tunnel, but in just over 20 years that followed, we achieved breakthroughs of 20,000 and even 30,000 meters. The Kunlun and Kilian, the Hengduan and Kinling, the Tianshan and Taihang. One after another, these massive mountain ranges were all pierced by tunnels large and small. In the past, the Qinghai-Tibet Railway had to climb 600 meters, taking 2 hours to cross Guanjiao Mountain. But today, thanks to an incredibly long tunnel stretching 32,690 meters, it takes only 20 minutes to pass straight through the mountain. It is precisely these tens of thousands of tunnels and millions of bridges that have allowed us to cross formidable natural barriers, build railways in every direction, and extend highways to every county and village. They have also enabled us to lay out the world's largest expressway network and high-speed rail network. Today, this fully connected China can transport 17.6 billion passenger trips and 46.2 billion tons of cargo to every corner of the country each year. And behind these enormous figures lies a massive reorganization of population and resources. 100 years ago, China had a population of about 400 million, but today, that number has surpassed 1.4 billion, exceeding the total population of all developed countries combined. What's more important is that the majority of them have all received a compulsory education, with no one left behind, and with more and more people entering colleges and universities to pursue higher learning. It is precisely through the largest scale in human history of basic education and higher education that in just a few short decades, the massive burden of its population was transformed into a demographic dividend. When this educated population entered the factories, they formed the busiest production assembly lines in the world, continuously attracting global industries to relocate to China. And when they entered the internet, mobile communications, and other emerging industries with high demand for labor and short research and development cycles, they helped China leapfrog the competition. Ultimately, on the lands of China, they built the first industrial civilization on this blue planet, with a population in the billions. At the same time, along with the migration of its people, China also ushered in the largest scale urbanization process on this planet. Today, across the country, there are 6 megacities, with a permanent urban population of over 10 million, 10 major cities with over 5 million, and 77 large cities with over 1 million. They are the ones most likely to represent China in the future competition among the world's urban civilizations. When we look down from space, this must also be the most dazzling sight on the lands of China, and with the clustering of cities and industries, further enabled by an increasingly sophisticated transportation network and resource channels, a nationwide exchange of goods and resources was inevitably set in motion. For example, grain from the north and coal are continuously transported south, fruits from the south, and water resources are sent north in vast quantities. The West's abundant natural gas, thermal power, and hydropower Solar and wind power travel thousands of miles, continuously sent to the densely populated central and eastern regions. Through this kind of reorganization and integration, this country, which originally had an extremely uneven distribution of natural resources, has ultimately formed a continent-sized market that includes 1/5 of the world's population. Such a vast market brings significant economies of scale. It not only allows China to, from its many mega projects, gain sufficient returns and spillover effects, becoming the infrastructure maniac that the world watches, but it also supports our development of some high-investment, long-cycle strategic industries. For example, becoming the third player in the global large aircraft industry after the United States and Europe. However, as the wheels of development roll forward, they have also overwhelmed an already deteriorating ecological environment. We have had to launch a series of campaigns that last for years, or even decades, to restore our fragile homeland. Among these are efforts to reduce soil erosion and prevent desertification, such as the national greening projects represented by the 3 North Shelter Belt program, in order to have clean air, water, and soil, from homes to factories, rural areas to cities, transportation methods to energy structures, and even the entire society's concept of development. A transformation must occur. These are the 3 great battles for blue skies, clear water, and clean land. And in order to explore a better model for coexistence between humans and nature, a brand new system of protected natural areas centered around national parks has been established, and so on. Although in this process, we've taken many wrong turns, and the future remains a long and arduous journey. But the continuously increasing forest coverage rate, the number of days with good air quality, and the proportion of water sections with excellent quality. Although in this process, we've taken many wrong turns, and the future remains a long and arduous journey. But the continuously increasing forest coverage rate, the number of days with good air quality, and the proportion of water sections with excellent quality have all achieved results visible to the naked eye, as well as the area of our nature reserves and more. It continues to allow us to more clearly see the path to the future. And so, after more than 100 years of connection, reorganization, and restoration, we have broken through this land's original environmental limitations, creating the world's most unique transportation network and urban clusters. We have also launched the largest ecological initiative on the planet. After more than 100 years, we have reshaped our very landscape. Standing here today and looking back on the years gone by, it's just as our middle school history textbooks say. The Chinese people carried the national humiliation of the Eight-Nation Alliance's occupation of the Qing capital, Beijing, into the 20th century. However, it was the tireless struggle of generations of Chinese people, blazing a trail through the thorns, that finally allowed a once-shattered nation to rebuild and restore itself and walk the path of rejuvenation. And it is they who finally allowed us, more than 100 years later, to be able to draw ever closer to a dream. It is the dream of Yu Pelin, Fang Xingdong, Chen Jingshen, Lin Huamen, and the other 72 martyrs of the Huanghua Gang uprising. The dream they held as they fell under the guns and cannons of the Qing army. It is the dream of Mao Zedong, He Shuheng, Dong Biwu, Chen Tanchu, and other delegates from communist groups across the country. The dream they so earnestly hoped for on that boat on Jiaxing's South Lake. It is the dream of Chen Zuzhen, Li Siguang, Deng Jiaxian, Eichiri Luogang, and more than 2,500 other experts and scholars living abroad, who gave up privileged lives. The dream they had as they returned to the embrace of their motherland. It is a dream that generations upon generations of Chinese people have never stopped dreaming since the year 1840. Today, we pay tribute to those Chinese people who, in the face of adversity, changed the destiny of our nation. And in the future, there will surely be more who take up the banner of their forefathers on this ancient land, creating a new miracle.